Welcome to Aspen Leading Edge podcast. This is Patty Roberts from St. Mary's University School of Law. And today I have the pleasure of talking with the professor and assistant dean for curricular innovation at Roger Williams University School of Law in Rhode Island. And you'll notice that I didn't introduce her by name. And that is because she has a very long last name that she schooled me on pronouncing, but I liked her answer better. So Nicole, tell me how to say your last name.
Well, Patty, I don't ever use it. I just go by Nicole, like just Nicole, like Madonna, like Prince, like Cher, Nicole. I've been trying to update my references for our students, and I was thinking about being Nicole, just like Drake. But then Drake is problematic, so now I have to work on someone younger who just has one name.
Okay, if we were going to push you and press to say your last name, even though you don't go by it, please pronounce it for us.
It's Dyszlewski, and I always tell people Dyszlewski. There's three very easy words. My last name is phonetic and Polish, but almost no one knows Polish, including myself. So I just tell people Dyszlewski.
Well, I love it. Nicole, I'm going to just use Nicole. And Nicole, you are doing some really interesting work. When we were talking about the episode and what we were going to talk about, there are so many things that I want to know more about. And so first, I want to talk about your work as Assistant Dean for Curricular Innovation in the area of race and the law. So tell us what Roger Williams is doing with race and the law that's new this year.
Sure. So our story starts kind of in 2016. And in 2016, we started a strategic planning group. And I know when I say that, all the listeners are like, ugh, strategic planning.
I am like that, yes.
All the listeners and the host. And it was on the topic of DEI. And I think it was with faculty and administration, members of the board, students, alumni. And I think what we came to is we either need to put our money where our mouth is on issues of DEIB, or we need to stop saying sort of that this is what we're about. And so what happened is we created this really long document with all these buckets of things, and we created a committee that would sort of assess our progress. And what we decided was, as a group, that Roger Williams University School of Law, which at the time was like 25 years old, is mission focused on social justice. And so this group really grew a movement at my school, and we changed the mission statement. And then every time when any group was trying to make a decision about, do we do more social justice or less social justice, we all like sort of really leaned in. And not just social justice, but particularly diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and then even more specifically race. So that when 2020 happened and our Black Law Students Association made a set of demands on our faculty, our school, faculty and staff unanimously voted to start a race class. And then we didn't have any sense of exactly what it would be, but we voted it in anyway. And then we did the work of developing it. We ran some trials, and now we have a mandatory 3-credit class called Race and the Foundations of American Law that all of our second year students must take. And it is amazing. And so we are in our 3rd year of that being required. Every year it gets different. We tweak, we change based on what's going on and what we've learned. We have big name speakers. It's really exciting that the students, not only what we're talking about, but who comes to talk to us. A couple of weeks ago, we had Dr. Karen Korematsu, Fred Korematsu's daughter, come and talk to our students who were just in awe. And so it's really, really exciting. And sort of while that was happening, at the same time, me and a group of one of my colleagues and some other law librarians were working on co-editing a book series called Integrating Doctrine and Diversity. So we had been working on it since I think 2018, and we were in our final draft, submitting our final draft in the summer of 2020, which was fraught and difficult to ask people to hurry up and finish their things on time while, it really felt like there was this racial reckoning happening in real time.
It really was. Yeah.
And so everybody wanted to change their chapters at the last minute, and we submitted it it was published and it was just focused on the first year. And then the second volume came out earlier this year in January, which is focused on second and third year classes, but not podium classes generally. Some skills, but not really anything experiential, which is what I hope our third volume will be. But they're stagnant. They are only as updated as the moment they are on the page. And so when we were thinking about, well, how do we be true to the authors who contributed to this? My answer was we should start a webinar series. That the book is great and it's important and it's something I can hold up and point to and say we did this. But we have 5 to 7 webinars a year during the academic year where we talk about issues related to DEIB work and social justice. How do we integrate doctrine and diversity? So a race class is great, and I'm really supportive of our race class, and I teach in it and I love it, and it's difficult, but race is not something that should be taught in one class separate and aside. It should be taught organically throughout the curriculum. We're teaching it separate and aside till we get to that point. But for right now, we're trying to ramp up the throughout the curriculum, and we have the race class. But so many students are still in places where their law faculty are not teaching all the issues of sort of identity and inclusion in the curriculum. And so this free webinar series is my attempt to help anyone who wants to do this work, anyone who teaches. So whether you're a librarian or a professor or an adjunct, or you're sort of teach through the way you practice law, you're welcome to come. Students are welcome to come. And we have these speakers who talk about how they're doing this in their classes. So the conversation is not, should you do this? The conversation is, if you want to do this, if you're curious about doing it, here are some ways that work and don't work, so that we're never really arguing over the existence of this. We're just teaching people like, hey, we're all in this together. This is how we do it. And I think people are pretty honest about sometimes this is how we do it really poorly. And what do we do when we've done that? Which I think is the biggest hurdle for all law professors is, well, I'd rather not take on an area that I might mess up. And so learning the skills of what to do when you mess up, I think is maybe the best contribution that we have to this whole conversation.
My goodness, what a rich selection of topics that we can follow up on. I'm going to start with what you started with, and that was the mandatory 3-credit class. Actually, you started with how you were planning this as a faculty in 2016, and the 3-credit class came up after the incidents of 2020 and George Floyd, which was a horrific moment and was like day 3 of me being a dean. I mean, I just can remember, like, there are statements flying all over the place from deans all across the country, and I felt like I should say something, but I didn't know what I should say, and the students didn't know me yet. It was awful. I ended up writing a prayer, which I don't know if that was the right thing to do, but that was the only thing I could do. And I wish.
And it was also, not to interrupt you, it was also in the middle of COVID.
That's right, exactly.
So we were learning how to learn online, trying to meet the needs of our students all over the country who were hurting. And then all of that was on top of it. So give yourself some grace.
Thank you. It was a crazy time for sure. But so your faculty really leaned into this, which is exciting to hear. And then you started this mandatory 3-credit course. I'm intrigued by it because anytime you say mandatory course, faculty bristle, students bristle, but this is for all of your 2Ls. So what has the reception been among students and faculty? And in addition to having exciting speakers, what do students experience in the class? What kind of work are they doing?
Sure. I would say the reception has been wildly positive. However, there have been some notable exceptions. I think the more we do it, the more people will become comfortable with it. It'll just be more normalized. But also, students have the choice to go to law schools where there isn't a 3-credit mandatory class. And so I think in the beginning, maybe there was a little more resistance. Is this really law? Or why are we doing this? But I think as that sort of time has gone on, so we ran it twice as an elective and 3 times as we're in the third go round of it being mandatory. That's really quieted down, at least to our faces. Anything could be happening behind our backs, but
yes, but usually things have like a 3-year life, right?
Yeah. And so it's been, I think, like we're at the moment where my semester has been dreamy. I have been talking to students about things that I think are so important. And 2 days a week, I get to come in and engage on a really high level on issues that I think are justice. We're talking about justice. And speaking of prayers, like I feel so blessed to be at Roger Williams and to have the students that we have. And the class is team taught. And that's another thing that I really appreciate I deeply appreciate the people on the journey with me. It's not like just me standing up there. It's always me and one or two other people who are there when things get really bad. Like if somebody gets really emotional, if somebody's hurt, there's always a second or third professor there who might have a different identity than me, might have a different life experiences, who can stand up and say, well, hey, maybe here's a little different a perspective, or this is how I might handle something. And so we are all in it together. And that is one innovation that, it's really uncomfortable to co-teach as a law professor because you want to have say over what book we use and how we teach and what our assessments are. And so working together is sometimes a little bit of herding cats, but it is a very enriching experience to work with someone else who has your back all the time when you're being really brave and vulnerable and having these difficult conversations. That's sort of the how. The what, we have a curriculum separated into 3 parts. The first approximately third of the class is history. We feel like let's even the playing field so that no matter where you went to school, you have the same level of history. It's hard to do the start of colonization to roughly the civil rights movement in 5 weeks, but we try. Week 1 is race is a social construct. Let's get used to talking about this. And then we go into colonization, chattel slavery, the history of sort of racism in the Constitution, slavery in the Constitution and the Electoral College, Reconstruction. And that sort of is our 5-week first section. The second section is then it's seeing how the way in which race, and particularly focusing on whiteness, how this plays out in modern systems of oppression, like mass incarceration, like voting suppression. And so the middle section is, and it can change depending on who's teaching and what the year is, but housing segregation, education. And then the final section is about the future. What are we doing now that we've discovered that we have this long history and we see how it's playing out? What are the solutions for this? So we talk about things like truth telling, and we talk about critical race theory, we talk about reparations, we talk about anti-racist lawyering. We have Professor Narinda Brown Hyatt come and talk about Afrofuturism as our sort of forward-looking last week. And so it's this really beautiful arc. And you see sort of it in the students where, and there's always outliers, people who didn't know any of this and people who studied this extensively in college, but generally you see people feeling sort of sad and lied to and uninformed. And then they get to the middle section and they're grieving for the justice system that they were led to believe was fair and noble. And then when they sort of are ready to cash it in, they get to the third section and then there's this hope. There's we are the next generation of legal professionals who would serve on truth commissions, who might write reparations ordinances, who are doing the thing. And so what are ways that we as clerks, as lawyers, can make a difference, whether that's in what we do every day in a criminal law system, or even our pro bono work, or our legislative work, or our volunteer work beyond law. And so it's a really, really nice arc, but a lot of it is really difficult, as you can imagine.
Well, I love that you have a third of it in that arc that is hope and forward looking and planning and brainstorming. And I can see how that would be not only healing, but inspiring after the first 2/3. Well, that's very exciting. Is there a book that goes along with this course?
Yes, up until now, we have been using an open educational resource, and now we are in the process of writing the book, or in the process of more precisely publishing the book, which should be out this spring. That follows the same arc. That I feel like there's a lot of race in the law books, and there is several very, very good, amazing race in the law books, which I must say we are not in any way trying to be. Just that, I feel like our contribution is this arc and the idea of joy. Even in the chapters that are more difficult to get through, even when the students are reading or watching movies or listening to podcasts about slavery, we also put in that no matter how many times that Black life making has been oppressed, it has sprung back up. That there is this beauty in resistance and the history of resistance and art and music and life making. And I think that's our contribution, which is not just the art, but also our approach is really to say there is beauty here in the voices you might not always hear from in legal textbooks. And, here are poems from people who are currently or formerly incarcerated. Here are pictures of people whose stories may get lost in the retelling of Reconstruction. And so I think that that's what we try to do, and we'll see how successful we have been when it comes out.
Terrific. Well, it sounds like a lot of stories of grit and resilience, and that can always balance some of the more horrible tellings. So that is a book called what? What will it be called?
Race and the Foundations of American Law.
Okay, and that should come out in the spring from
Yeah.
Aspen Publishing?
Yes, I think March or April.
Okay, great. Well, we'll keep an eye out for that. Now, the Integrating Doctrine and Diversity series that you are lead editor for and consists of 2 volumes. What might a professor find if they were to take a look at that series, and what might they use it for?
Sure, thanks for asking. That's a great question because I think the uniqueness is how it's structured. So I served on this committee at my law school and I heard these 2 sides of it. I heard professors who were saying, I have the entire history of property law to teach. Please, I can't get everything in. And adding DEI material, adding social justice material, changing my material is too much for 1L students. It's too much for me. I'm not trained in this. I don't have time. I don't have resources to learn. And not to just blame property professors. I also heard from business organizations professors who said, well, that has nothing to do with what I teach. And it would be artificial. And I am empathic to that as someone who teaches. And then I also heard students who were saying, hey, at Roger Williams, I think that you all are doing a great job supporting us outside the classroom. I don't feel seen in the classroom. And then I started to talk to students all over the country, and I got sort of a similar message that in a lot of our law schools, students of color, students with disabilities, students who are non-binary are feeling like they aren't seen because either it's just not part of the textbook or the curriculum. And then a second issue that came up a lot was if someone brings it up, a student brings it up, a faculty member who is not trained in this or not comfortable with this will just pivot to the next thing. So, okay, well, let's move on to the next case. And that person is left, either if it's a disturbing comment, it's left hanging there, or if it's a person who genuinely wanted to sort of relate this to their own identity or experience or the lived experiences of minoritized people, that it was sort of ignored and we just move on, a march towards contracts or whatever. And so my background is as a law librarian. I felt like, oh, this can't be that hard. Like there must be people who have written
Not that hard.
Yep, okay. Yes, that's an appropriate time to laugh. But I felt like, look, there's got to be a ton of resources on how to do this. And what I found is there are resources on how to do this that were not all kept in one place. That there'd be a law review article here, there'd be a video here, a podcast episode, but there was nothing that pulled it all together. And I thought, well, that's what we do. That's what law librarians do. We don't need to know everything. We need to know how to find everything. So let me make it so that it's practical and easy. So I called some of my best law librarian friends and said, hey, do you want to do this? And they said, absolutely. And then I talked to one of our clinical educators, Professor Susie Harrington-Steppen at Roger Williams. And I said, hey, you went to CUNY and you clinical people, you experiential people, you're good at this stuff. Tell me, who should I talk to? And she said, go to CUNY. So I called the law library at CUNY and said, you don't know me, but hey, can you help me? And they had been cataloging some of these resources in their collection. So they sort of knew about all this already. And so we got together and we decided to create a resource that, one, has annotated bibliographies of all of the main topics of first year classes, but then 2, had essays from law professors who teach in these subjects. So you're not going to get what I think you should do in a contracts class to integrate doctrine and diversity. You're going to get what a law professor who has been doing this thinks you should do. Here's an example case, some are case studies. Here's a case that I use. Here's an exercise I use. And then some are more reflective, how your own identity might impact how it's received by students, things that have gone wrong, general advice about how to do this work and be successful at it. So there's a mix of things, but really there's the first section is kind of general use, which I recommend for everybody. And then after that, you could just go to your section of what you teach. Let's go to Crim, let's go to Crim Pro, whatever it is. And there will be a chapter of essays written by professors who teach what you teach. And I think in some cases, they're amazing luminaries of people who I was scared to email to begin with, but really generous people who have given their time and talent to help other people be in community and have conversations about how they've done it. And everyone that I've talked to on the project is like, oh, if you have somebody who wants to do this, have them email me. We could talk about it. So everybody's like very generous and willing to learn and grow. And then we repeated that for the second volume. And there's some PR professors, there's some, for lack of a better term, money law classes where the professors are talking about it. family law. And so it sort of follows that. Everybody can read the first section, especially administrators, and then the professors can just kind of hop to the chapters on what they teach.
Sounds amazing. So the first, do I understand correctly? The first volume is the first year courses and the second volume is upper level courses?
Yes, although not clinical or experiential, just kind of podium or skills classes.
Because that's going to be maybe volume 3?
I mean, I hope so, but there is a point at which, and Patty, you'll experience it in a few minutes, I'm sure, where I just wear people out. Where I'm like, this is a good idea, that's a good idea, this is a good idea. And so I think that the co-editors might need like a year or two off to breathe and, do other amazing things. And, eventually I think I'll convince them back. But for right now, I think people are on a little bit of a hiatus, but I'm going to get them back. And that is my plan. That is our plan for book 3.
Fantastic. Well, as a former clinician and someone who now has experience co-editing, let me know if I can help. Because I am co-editing an Anti-Racist Development Institute volume with Jay Austin, volume 3 on admissions and financial aid. And I understand you're also co-editing a volume 5, did you say?
Yes, volume 5 on teaching. I think volume 4 is on the curriculum and 5 is on teaching, or 4 is on teaching and 5 is on the curriculum. I'm doing 5.
Okay, so, and some similar topics then to integrating doctorate and diversity, those kinds of things. Well, that's going to be an excellent addition to the project. When you mentioned your webinars, they're 5 to 7 a year, you said, based on the topics explored in the integrating doctrine and diversity. Who's watching these webinars?
We have a running list, but as far as we can tell, since we've been tracking it from the beginning, someone from 94% of all ABA accredited law schools have come to our webinars. And I only say that, I mean, I'm proud. I don't mean to be a braggart, but
no, you should be. That's incredible.
It's a wide audience because I think people want to learn how to do this better. I don't think everyone wants to teach a required race class, but I do think people want to learn how to do the thing that students are clamoring for. Because what we've seen in the last few years is students clamoring for this type of teaching. And I think law professors want to give it to their students. They just don't know how. And I think it's not divisive. It's not, well, should I do this and what percentage should I do it and who should I include, who should I exclude? This is political. I think it's your students are looking for it. These things, these exercises, these examples from your peers and these conversations about how to do it are helpful. And that's it. I think that that's been part of the success is I'm not going to shame anyone who doesn't do it. I just want to uplift the voices of people who are trying it and being bold and brave and vulnerable. And really, I think vulnerability is this really important legal value that maybe we need to do more of in law school. And I think these are people who are amazing and being vulnerable. And I just think being in community and conversation is what the key to success is. It's not me, although I moderate everything and I love moderating. It's the people who are doing it. And occasionally we bring in students to share their perspective about it. But I think that that's been the secret to the success of it is it's easy to adopt. And I've heard schools who take the recordings and show it at faculty meetings, like faculty educational sessions. People ask me for the recordings for class. I put all the recordings online if that's helpful. And it's been a really amazing experience because I feel like I'm really able to uplift the voices of people who are doing amazing work. And I just get to sit and learn from them all.
That's how I feel about this podcast. I just love to hear what amazing work my colleagues are doing from across the country, yourself included, and amplify it for other legal educators and students to hear about. As far as your law school goes, I know that you have recently opened or had a ribbon cutting for your Institute for Race and the Law. Tell me a little bit about that.
So we're doing all these sort of disparate things. And so we have created this institute in order to pull it all together under one roof. We are currently in the process of sort of visioning. We've been, again, strategic planning. And the idea is to work not just in academia, but also within the community and try and find how we can serve what my former dean and my current dean have both told me. We serve this sort of convening function. We're the only law school in our state. And so how can we best use this institute and the resources we have at Roger Williams to not just give our students the best experience, but also to convene some of these conversations with the judiciary, with our community, with our town. The town that we're in, Bristol, is really interesting because it has a history of being very involved in the slave trade, not necessarily because of the numbers of enslaved people, but the numbers of voyages that left from Bristol and the number of millionaires who got rich from the slave trade were located in Rhode Island. And so Bristol is this real hub of a town, which is this amazing traditional New England town, but also has to be and is reckoning with their history. At the same time, we're also at the intersection of King Philip's War. And so not only do we need to reckon with our history of chattel slavery and how we, as a town and a state, benefited from that, but also from colonization and the way in which Indigenous people were treated and continue to be treated. And so I don't know, I find like there's this really interesting convergence of all of this happening at once. And that is like the place where the Institute is. It's sort of the middle of all of this. And I think we're going to continue to see what happens with it. So I think I'll have a more discrete answer about what we're doing the next time you invite me back.
Well, it sounds like you're doing so many incredible things, including tell us about the summer camp that you did this summer.
Oh my gosh, this is so fun. So we started a social justice summer camp that was totally funded by a donor. His name is Mark Mandel, and his wife and his son were all lawyers. And this family funded a summer camp, a week-long social justice and law summer camp experience for middle school students throughout the state of Rhode Island. So we had 20 students, and we just took the first 20 who sort of signed up, and we, what I would describe as like, marched them through the law in Rhode Island. So it started with a greetings from Sheldon Whitehouse came and spoke to the kids. So these middle school kids were getting this amazing impassioned speech from Sheldon Whitehouse about judicial ethics. I'm sure the kids were like, what are you talking about? Like, one kid is like getting this speech about judicial ethics in a head to toe SpongeBob SquarePants outfit. And I thought, wow, this isn't. And then we did all the things like there was a tragedy in Rhode Island called the Station nightclub fire. We had one of the lawyers for the Station nightclub victims come and speak to the students. We met with the president of the Victims Association. We went to where it happened. We learned about the law of fire regulation, what has happened since. They were able to go to the memorial and see the graves and sort of learn all about tort law and some basics of, they made their own little law firms and they had like these big tort cases. We also went to the legislature where they debated an issue that was relevant to, middle school kids, and they got to sit on the floor of the Rhode Island House of Representatives and like press the button to vote. And we had a panoply of legislators come and talk to them and like pretend to be for and pretend to be against. The Secretary of State came, and then one day we had a debate where they each debated issues like, should you have election day off, that type of thing. And we brought the person who does the debates in Rhode Island. I call him local celebrity Tim White. He's like from Channel 12. We had him come and we had him talk to the kids and do their debate. And next to him was the mayor of Providence, who was giving the kids constructive feedback. And it was this warm, amazing thing. And the students just, every day we just took them somewhere else legal and taught them about law and introduced them to judges and lawyers, and they spent a day in court. And it was too much for a week, but it was this great experience, and I hope to do it again. And it was just as good for all of us who worked at camp as it was for the students. And the most touching thing happened at the end, which is a mother stopped me and she said, I just want to let you know that my daughter has selective mutism, and this has been such an amazing experience. And I thought, wow, this is a girl who on debate day like participated in a debate in front of an actual journalist, and we had no idea the entire week.
Wow.
And so I think I was shocked, and I was really honored that the kids took it so seriously, and that there was someone who was really able to engage with this maybe in a level that she doesn't at school. Or I just feel really lucky that we have this amazing family of donors, but also that I'm at an institution who wants to do pathway programs and who values being a member of the community, and also a legal community that when you email and say, can you please show up on Tuesday during court hours at a summer camp for kids, it's like, absolutely, let me help.
That sounds like so much fun. I hope that you will track those students? I'd love to see how many like decide they want to go to law school, want to go to college, what comes from this early pipeline summer camp. Now, I could talk to you all afternoon, but we both have other things that we have to do, unfortunately. So you'll have to come back and tell me more about your projects as they continue to develop. But before we end, I'd like to ask you what your predictions are for the future of legal education in the coming decade.
I think it's really hard. That's a really, really hard question, but I think we'll continue to grow online classes and programming. I think we're going to continue to stray from tradition in how we teach and what we teach. And I think we're going to even more informed by brain science as teachers. And I think all of those are good things.
Well, I thank you so much for sharing all the great things that are going on at Roger Williams University School of Law under your Institute for Race and the Law. And congratulations on the upcoming Race and the Foundations of American Law book that will be published in spring 25 through Aspen Publishing. And I'm going to take a stab at it. Thank you so much, Professor Nicole Dyszlewski.
Woohoo! You got it.
Woohoo! Okay, known to everyone else as Nicole. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, I hope that you will check out Aspen Leading Edge's webpage for additional podcast episodes. You can listen to a lot of legal education thought leaders on that webpage or on your favorite podcast channels. Thank you.